All right, and welcome back to WBCR 88.3 The Saint. I'm Justin Kenny as always, and tonight we have a very special guest, somebody who will also probably bring back for some of the audience a little bit of nostalgia for people of a certain age who probably my age and a little bit older, is James Keys. So Jim, thank you for being with us.
Great to be with you.
So why don't you start us off a little bit about, by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I've got a relatively interesting business career. I think if you look at the various roles I've had,
Yeah.
I had much of my career was with 7-Eleven. I had 21 years literally with between 7-Eleven and the parent company, the Southland Corporation. And I had the privilege of sitting in just about every chair there, from running a retail operations to marketing to chief financial officer, and ultimately became CEO of the company.
Yeah.
Had a pretty good run, and we sold the company actually in 2005 to our largest licensee, 7-Eleven Japan.
Huh.
Which then gave me the opportunity. We had really used technology to transform the company, and that gave me a pretty good understanding of what we needed to do for companies like Blockbuster that needed to be transformed. So I joined Blockbuster with the intent of using technology to take it to the next level.
Yeah, so one of the things that, because I'm a recent MBA grad, and I talked to my professor a little bit about you, and one of the things he was kind of curious, since you brought it up, was the sale of 7-Eleven to Japan, and also kind of what was the main difference, whether it be cultural, business-wise, whatever, between 7-Eleven when it was when before it was sold to Japan, and then 7-Eleven after it became, in more ways than not, a Japanese company.
Yeah. I think the difference in the two entities, first of all, it was one company. 7-Eleven Japan was a licensee of 7-Eleven Inc., the parent company, up until 2005. And I think very simply stated, we were guilty, 7-Eleven Inc., the global entity, was guilty of being a victim of our own success. We more or less invented the convenience industry back in 1927 when the company was born, led the industry for many years, but we stopped keeping up with change. We did not embrace technology. As I said, we're a bit of a victim of our own success because big companies, when they get big, then resist change.
Yeah.
So, classic example, when I arrived at the company, it was on the gasoline side. There was huge resistance to even put gasoline island card readers, the credit card readers in the pump.
Yeah.
Huge resistance from the legacy management because it was change. And they thought, no, you have to force people into the store to buy things, when they come for gasoline. It was just a different mindset. And so those conservative those conservative management ideas and reluctance to change really impaired 7-Eleven to the point that it filed for bankruptcy in 1991. Now, I then had a chance to see the licensee, 7-Eleven Japan, and their success up close, because they didn't want the company, the parent company, to be bankrupt. So they decided to come in and help all the way back to 1991. I was shocked at what I had seen. They had truly embraced technology. Now, granted, they started much later. They had only been in business as a licensee for probably 30 years or so when I finally got a chance to see them. So they basically started their business 30 years prior to that with technology. And they embraced technology in a way to be able to enable the store operator, make them a better retailer, fabulous collection and use of data to make really informed decisions. So I saw that, and that was the biggest difference between 7-Eleven Japan be able to execute fresh sushi in their stores every day, literally restaurant quality,
Yeah.
and 7-Eleven US struggling to sell a decent hot dog, right? That was the difference. It was that adoption of technology. Now, since then, the Japanese did acquire the company. They have not yet brought the full benefit of that technology to the US. I think you'll see it continue to happen over time, but it hasn't yet happened. 7-Eleven in the US hasn't evolved technologically speaking in the same way 7-Eleven Japan has to this date, but they will.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too familiar with 7-Eleven myself. All I really know about them is that they do the free Slurpees on 7-Eleven. Up here, this is more, it's upstate New York. This is more like we have our local chain Stewart's, but then we also have like, we used to be pretty big Hess territory, but then Hess was then sold to Speedway, plus a couple other ones. But those are really the two big ones in this area. Like everybody used to remember the Hess truck ads every Christmas.
Right.
Um, Used to get one of those every single year when I was a kid until Hess was then sold to Speedway. But another thing with 7-Eleven that people kind of find a little interesting, also regarding your experience at Blockbuster, is I also believe that your predecessor at Blockbuster also came from 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
And some people might find that to be a little strange because they always just think like, oh, how is 7-Eleven, a company that sells gasoline, going to help run a company that rents movies?
Yeah, it's not as big a leap as you might think. Think about Blockbuster's business model. It wasn't really about renting movies. That was just the method of delivery.
Yeah,
It was really about convenient access to movie content, to media entertainment. So convenience can come in any form. It can come in the form of a Slurpee or a hot dog. It can come in the form of an ATM being available 24 hours a day, or access to movies via VHS tape originally. The company then evolved to DVD, and then the next evolution would have been to stream video. Still
yeah,
convenient access to media entertainment.
yeah. So, I mean, because also I did a little bit of research during your time of it, is that one of the big things that you tried to do in regards to technology, as you talked about earlier in this interview, was the purchase or at least the integration of the then streaming service. I believe it was called Movie Link, if
Yeah,
I'm correct.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
so, can you kind of walk us through that process with Movie Link? Um, why it kind of take off to the point that like Netflix did at the time, because like you two were kind of neck and neck at the point. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Sure. First of all, you have to understand the difference in the models. The Netflix model was a subscription model. In other
Yeah,
words, when you've got the all you can eat buffet, you're never going to find, New York strip on all you can eat buffet, right?
yeah,
It's going to be the regular mainstream stuff. And when it came to movies, that's what Netflix had. The older movies, after they've already been, out for a long time, they had a good inventory of older movies. Whether it was DVDs by mail or streaming, that was their model, subscription model. Um, Blockbuster's model was the New York strip model. It was if you remember going in the stores, 80% of the
yeah,
business was new releases, right? It's a very different model, and it's a video on demand model, if you will. So you'd rent a DVD and you'd rent it for a certain number of days for a certain price, and you'd bring it back. That's video on demand. That's very different from the subscription model. So ironically, I mean, these are two very different business models with two very different customer propositions. Um,
yeah,
in many ways, Netflix didn't really compete with Blockbuster for its core business for that new release. And a lot of people miss that. They just gloss right over it. It's like saying that Chinese all you can eat buffet would compete with Del Frisco's. No, not really. Two different business models, right?
yeah,
So a lot
yeah.
of people,
Oh,
well,
go ahead.
when it came time for streaming, we bought a company called Movie Link because it was much more consistent with Blockbuster's business model. It had all of the new releases in video on demand. Now, once we had that capability, we also had the ability to stream the older content and would have done that via subscription the same way Netflix did. But the difference would have been our model was to be the aggregator, just like the stores. In other words, not just old movies, not just new movies, not just video games, have it all available, just like the store, for streaming online. That
Yeah.
was that was the model. A very different business model from what Netflix had and still has, actually. You're still
Yeah.
not going to see Top Gun on Netflix, right? For a long, long time.
No, I mean now, especially with the flooded streaming market you have now, it probably goes straight to
Yeah.
Paramount or one of
But
those
there's
services.
a reason, there's an economic reason, and everybody kind of glosses over these business models. They don't think about the economic reason. When it
Yeah.
costs $500 million to make a movie like Top Gun, the last thing you want to do is to see it go in the all-you-can-eat buffet.
Yeah.
Right? You want to get as much revenue out of that for as long as you possibly can. And then someday, Top Gun will end up in Netflix collection. Someday.
That's one. Well, I mean, that's one way of putting it. Most people always just kind of like the black and white version of just Netflix was turned down by Blockbuster, and
Yeah.
then Netflix just knocked Blockbuster out, or whatever way you want to put it. And I don't know if it's just because that's easier for people to comprehend, or if it's
Yeah.
just not everybody's like an MBA or something like that who's interested in business history.
People always go to the easy answer. It's like, oh, Blockbuster's gone, Netflix must have crushed them. No, it's just a different, there were very different business models. And the real the real reason that Blockbuster is not around today had nothing to do, or little to do, with Netflix. It had a lot more to do with um, a balance sheet and having $1 billion of debt on the balance sheet. Netflix had none.
Yep.
Uh, Blockbuster had $1 billion, and everyone also forgets the timing. It's, hindsight is so easy. You can always look back and go, oh yeah, why didn't Blockbuster stream? Well, in 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed in September of 2008, right after we had bought Movie Link, right after we had doubled our earnings, and we were actually on a really good path. But we also had $1 billion of debt, and the banks virtually shut down in 2009.
Yeah.
So that made it exponentially more difficult for a Blockbuster to continue on that path of trying to grow subscribers, build a video on demand streaming business, and keep the stores going at the same time.
Yeah. And you bring up the balance sheet.
Hmm.
So there's also everybody my age also remembers, and I'm 26. Everybody my age has some memory of Blockbuster because I was 12 or like 11 when Blockbuster went out. But I still remember there being a Blockbuster down the road from me. I also remember a Hollywood Video, although I never went inside the Hollywood Video. Um, but a lot of us remember the period of just no late fees. And before they were ended, that was such a huge revenue stream for the company. How do you handle kind of a loss of that big of revenue at a
Uh,
company like that?
it was huge. It wasn't just the revenue. It was $80 million in cash flow
Yeah.
profits gone. And this was a decision made prior to my arrival. I first thing I did was to ask for the economics, and the belief was that they were going to, by eliminating late fees, they were going to make it up in sufficient revenue performance that so many more people would be happy at Blockbuster and come more often. It didn't move the needle at all. People said, "Okay, thanks. I'll keep the video now, and I won't worry about late fees." But think about the cost of that. You buy a video for $20 or $15 from the studios. and then you have to rent it 20 times to make it pay out, to make it pay for itself. But if someone, after 2 rentals, someone keeps it, takes it home, and now keeps it for 6 months, if that was Top Gun, by the time they brought it back, it's not a new release anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's like I lost money on it. So it was one of those things that no one liked late fees, but you could never go to a library, borrow a book, and just keep it indefinitely. The library couldn't stay in business, right?
Yeah.
That's why the
Yeah.
library charged the library a late fee if you didn't bring your book back.
Yeah. I mean, like the only other thing I can think of that's comparable to it was when Capital One said they were no longer going to do overdraft fees. Now,
Yeah.
granted, there's kind of a moral reasoning behind that because some people say that overdraft fees are inhumane and hurt working people. But then again, on the other hand, you also have the fact that they're a bank and have other ways through investments and stuff to make up that loss. But everybody was still thinking like, oh, hey, they're leaving like can't remember the numbers they were throwing around, but they're leaving like billions of dollars on the table.
Yeah. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's just economics, and everybody always wants something for free. But if you step back from it and you look at the economics behind late fees, wasn't unreasonable. Now we ended up going back not with late fees. There's a misperception that we put late fees back in. We did not in the same sense that it used to be, because late fees were pretty onerous. They would build every day. You didn't bring it back. You'd get higher and higher and higher and
Yeah.
higher. We put in a program that said basically, look, these movies are expensive. If you don't bring it back in, 2 weeks, then we're going to charge you for the price of that movie, but you can get to keep it at that point. Because basically what you said to us is you want it. So you just bought it. And that's a very different approach than late fees. But again, people like to jump to the conclusion that, oh, late fees put back, Blockbuster put back late fees, and that's what killed the business. No, not at all. Not at all.
No. Yeah. I mean, the story I mostly hear is the Netflix one. I don't hear much about the late fees one, except for people saying that like it contributed, but that's only really if you kind of poke around a little bit. Um, I also remember hearing something about pretty much your dealings with Dish of selling Blockbuster to Dish. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. We obviously recognized that Blockbuster was good at stores, they were good at renting DVDs, but we didn't have the platform for digital distribution that we needed. Even though we bought the company, we had streaming technology, but we really didn't have the platform to go out and stream in a broader way. And we looked at other partners. We looked at Google. Google would have been a fabulous partner. And our discussions
Yeah.
with Google would have been everything free would have gone through YouTube, everything paid would have gone through Blockbuster. It was kind of a beautiful model, a very elegant solution. Google bailed on us when they picked up a rumor that we were going to file for bankruptcy. We would not have filed for bankruptcy with Google's partnership, of course, but that was a rumor, and so they decided to pull the deal. Dish was also a potential partner because Dish had good broad distribution, good studio relationships. So they were a logical partner for us to be able to say, okay, buy Blockbuster, help us get through a restructuring. I think their thought was at the time they would use the stores to sell their streaming service,
Yeah.
as well as the Blockbuster on demand service. They could sell the Dish network through the stores. They also had a vision for mobility that they could sell even today, Dish is in the mobility business with Apple, for example, with cell phone service. They would have been able to sell those kinds of services through the stores while at the same time further developing the digital on demand, both subscription and video on demand business.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm just thinking about the Google thing that you just told me about because I've never even heard of that ever before. And I was just thinking, like, with the way that my generation is so ingrained in kind of YouTube, that would have been huge and probably could have made you still rival Netflix if in kind of like a weird alternate universe, or if even taken over in some
It
ways.
would have
But
been it would have been a far superior model to Netflix
yeah,
because we would have been the aggregator. We had new movies through MovieLink.
yeah,
We had 3,000 titles of new releases.
yeah. I mean, that's an interesting parallel universe to think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, there's some things you wish you could do over again. That would be one of them, but it is what it is, and change happens in business. I've coined the expression. You know about my book, right? Education
yeah,
is so I coined the expression in the book, change equals opportunity. And it's comical because I get questions sometimes. I go, "Oh, the Blockbuster guy is talking about change." Yeah, because it was all about change. I got there because of the need for change, was in the process of making that change, and then the whole financial market collapsed. And so literally I had to adapt, pivot from trying to grow the digital business to saving the company and fixing the balance sheet problems. That's called change equals opportunity. The opportunity
yeah,
changed, and I had to respond to it. So it ended up being a success. We were able to successfully restructure the company, get it sailed. It didn't liquidate. It didn't go away. Dish eventually chose to close down the stores, but we ended up saving Blockbuster.
yeah. And before we move on to your book, I do want to ask you one final question about Blockbuster,
Sure.
which is hear some reports about like it was Carl Icahn who brought you in the Blockbuster and put you in there too. Can you tell me if there's truth to that, and if there is, kind of what was that whole entire situation like?
Yeah, I was actually trying to buy Blockbuster, not work for Blockbuster. I had partnered with a couple of private equity firms, and I was out trying to sell the idea that the best way to transform Blockbuster would be to take it private. And it turns out, it would have been because we would have restructured that that $1 billion of debt in 2007 as part of a take private strategy. When the financial markets melt down, we would have had just restructured our debt. We would have been fine.
Yeah,
Never skipped a beat, right? So anyway, I was out trying to execute that strategy, which means you've got to go out to the investment community. And I had a deck that talked about the Blockbuster strategy. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the business transformation plan. And I was trying to raise the money for the take private. One of the investors picked up the phone and called Carl Icahn. Said, "Hey, Carl, I got a guy in my office here. He says he's got a plan for Blockbuster." Carl said, "Have him come over." So 20 minutes later, I'm in Carl's office. And he's like, "Who the hell do you think you are? Why do you think you can do this?" I was like, "Well, because I just had a pretty successful exit over at 7-Eleven, and I think I know the strategy that we need to employ." And bottom line is he bought in. And he was super supportive for the first 2 or 3 years. We only lost Carl when the financial markets collapsed and Lehman Brothers shut their doors. Carl looked at the balance sheet and said, "There's no way you guys are going to be able to refinance this debt. You're probably, better off dead than alive." As sad. I mean, he's just a pretty black and white financial guy, and he looked at the future and said,
yeah,
you're already toast, so you might as well admit it and fold the cards. I respectfully disagreed with him. I have tremendous respect for Carl, but I said, I understand your approach and your strategy. I'm going to choose to stay with this and find a strategic partner and get to the other side of this thing. And
yeah,
we did. We were successful doing that.
you were,
Quite
and yeah, yeah. So now I want to switch gears to another thing that you're very passionate about, which is your book. So can you kind of walk us through your book and tell us a little bit about it?
yeah. I look around the country and I see so much misspent youth, with huge opportunity, but they don't really know how to apply it. I was one of those kids, and that's why I can see it. I had no business going to college. There's no way I could have afforded it. Nobody in my family went to school. I mean, everybody talks about the price of college today. I was making $1.25 at McDonald's, and college was 10,000 a year. So dial that forward to today's dollars. Well, you know, make $10 an hour today instead of $1 an hour, and college is 60, 70 grand a year. It's not any different, in terms of inflation. People think it's more expensive today. It's really not. So bottom line is, it ended up being the absolute key, my focus on learning. And yes, I chose the path of a formal education. What I talk about in the book is I too recommend a formal education, because most of us don't have the discipline to go out and be an Elon Musk on our own, or a
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos, and or Michael Dell quit school, whatever. Most of us don't have that discipline. We need a little more structure. So I do recommend the formal education. But bottom line is, I have a roadmap in the book that teaches you how to learn. Basically, it's all about learning to learn. So
Yeah.
I today can do anything. I can do anything, literally. You read my bio. I can fly airplanes. I fly my own jet, single pilot, 40,000 feet. Yes, that takes money, but it also takes skill and learning. And I had to study, but I knew I could do it. So I stayed with it, and I developed the knowledge necessary to fly my own airplanes. And so I can do that. I write music. How? I learned. So in this book, what I've done is I've put in the secret code, basically, and it is a bit of a secret code. It's what I wish somebody had told me when I was 20 years old, to say, hey, this is what you got to do. This is what to learn, how to learn, and why. And all
Yeah.
three are in here. It's not that hard. Look, if I could do it, literally anybody could do it.
Yeah, I read your bio and looked all over your website and everything, and you've done a lot. And also, just like I also know you were at the Red Cross. We have a member of the Sienna community who's currently our executive in residence. He came over from AT&T to the Red Cross. He said he knew of your name, but you two never crossed paths. But yeah, I also saw you're into art, music, and all these different other things. Quite the large palette you got there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm working with a rocket company now, startup rocket company. Like, but it's just about learning and really, most importantly, overcoming fear. I am fearless, truly fearless, because I've recognized that fear is like the biggest enemy. It's a killer. It kills careers. It kills individuals. It makes you do stupid stuff. We revert to that caveman mentality, or fight or flight. If there's something that we don't like, it scares us,
Yeah.
right? Ready to kind of duke it out. And it's just so stupid. You turn on the news today, all you hear is a fire hose of fear, right? Somebody's coming to get you. They're going to take something from you. They're going to do something to you. They're going to get something you don't have. Not fair, and it's all ludicrous if you think about it, because we live in America. Anybody can do anything they want in America with enough determination and enough knowledge. And so, what are we afraid? What are we afraid of?
Yeah. And I also want to ask you another question about one thing that you brought up there, how you went towards like music and art, is because you're also not the first person who's been like a top executive or political figure who turned to art. I mean, I had Paul Bremer on a year or two ago. Him and I stayed in touch and everything. I even bought one of his paintings from him, which I even have right here. Over here in this corner. But
Awesome.
yeah, I'll show it to you quickly.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah, I'll tell you like it. So, what is it you think about art and kind of going towards the music realm that people like even George W. Bush, former president of the United States, like I just mentioned, Paul Bremer and yourself, who are kind of these high level figures, kind of move towards after they retire or move on past their biggest point in their career, as some people would put it.
Yeah. I'll use an Einstein quote. Einstein said, that creativity is intelligence having fun.
Yeah.
And I love that because it's exactly what it is. I didn't, I mean, I'm a terrible piano player, right? I never really properly learned to play the piano. But here's the difference. I play the piano to learn.
Yeah.
Big difference. Big difference. Because I have fun doing it. I don't care what it sounds like. I'm having a blast and I'm learning every time I play. Same thing with painting. I don't care if it looks good. It feels good to do. And sometimes I get lucky and create something that's like, whoa, look at that. and and everybody likes it, right? But
Yeah.
I'm not learning to paint. I'm painting to learn. And that's what I think you find a lot of really successful people recognize that they have this other side of their brain that we don't often use, and it's fun to use it. It's fun to engage the right side of your brain, to be able to be creative and produce things that are outside of that normal day in, day out focus that you maybe had for your whole career. I recommend it for everybody. I really do.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think somebody one time told me that the piano is the only instrument you can play well or play crappy and nobody will complain.
Yeah, yeah. Well, see, that's the nice
Um,
part. Nice part about composing music. You hear some of these new compositions, and it's like, whoa, what are they thinking, right?
yeah.
So that's the way I look at composing music. It's like, how do they know it's I missed a note, or if I didn't write it that way, right? No, it's actually fun, and it's this is back to that fearless thing. So many of us are afraid because we're afraid we're not going to be good enough, right? Someone will judge us. Who cares? Who cares, right? And I mean, take art as an example. If you want to paint, if you want to be an artist, and you're afraid somebody's going to judge you, go to New York, go to MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, walk around, and you realize, wait a minute, that's a box of rocks. How is that art? It's a box of rocks. But in someone's eyes, it was an artistic endeavor, and it may be a wildly expensive box of rocks right now because it's, in fact, at MoMA. But I mean, there's such a lesson there that everyone has a different eye and a different point of view about what art is, what beauty is. And it's like once you free yourself of this fear, truly you can do anything. You can be an artist, you can be a musician, you can be a rocket
Yeah.
scientist.
Yeah. And so with that, I do also want to bring up or ask you about a little bit more in-depth question about your work. Being since you brought that you like composing and that you like painting, obviously I showed you the Paul Bremer painting, which he likes to do kind of like landscapes in front of his house or whatever. George W. Bush does like did an entire book of just paintings of U.S. immigrants who became successful. What do you usually like to compose music about and paint?
Oof. I wish I could say I had one genre. Painting, I always loved the Impressionists, and Impressionism is a little fuzzy, It's not like the Dutch masters with realism where you had to be, photorealistic. Impressionism's a little like
Yeah,
be drunk and squinting and say, "Oh yeah, it's beautiful," right? So I always loved. There's going to be one art person that listens to this. It's just going to like skewer me in the comments, but it's true. Anyway, I always loved the Impressionists, and I couldn't afford true Impressionist art, so I thought, well, let me just try it. You don't have to stay within the line, so I started, just working with palette and working with colors, and I found that I could actually create artwork in the like landscape in the Impressionist style. Then I discovered another genre that I've always loved, stained glass. And I thought, I wonder if I could paint stained glass because basically it's, making the outline of where the lead would be in the glass and then filling in the colors. Maybe I think I could do that, right? So I entered an art competition here locally and I actually created I don't know if you can see it, but I created this um, piece of
Oh
art.
wow.
Yeah, and it was a basically inspired by the stained glass windows at the Concertgebouw, the very famous concert hall in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Uh, so I did that piece, and it won the contest, and they blew it up to 9 feet by 22 feet, and it was outside of the Meyerson Concert Hall in Dallas for a full year. Um, Again, I'm not an artist. I just had an idea, and I was fearless enough to think I can do this, and I submitted my piece for a competition and won. So
Yeah.
it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting seeing all the artwork. I mean, I have a somewhat small collection from of stuff that I've purchased along the way from trips I've been on. Like I have a trip, I have one painting that was given to me by a orphan in Nepal when I was over there teaching English, and one that we kind of went into in Kenya. We went to this little art studio they had there at Banana Hill, which is right outside Nairobi. But it's also weird or kind of interesting is to kind of think about all the stuff that kind of just went into it, whether or not it's the art that we have at the Siena Library or an art studio. One piece of artwork that I'm always blown away by that we have at Siena is the St. John's Bible, which was, I don't know if you're too familiar with the project, but they did the whole entire Bible by hand again. And then
Wow.
they did paintings or kind of pictures on each other's side. And it's not all one book. I want to say it's 7 different volumes. And like the school will loan one out here and there to like different churches or whatever. But it's truly like amazing to think that like something like that was undertaken
Yeah,
and even done by just one human hand.
pretty amazing. Humans have a lot more potential than we are often given credit for, and it literally is the focus of my book to be able to say, any of us are capable of amazing things if we can just tap into those that what to learn, how to learn, and why. There's so much more each of us can do.
Yeah. And another question I also like to ask people in certain positions, and just because I know this is something everybody's always like biting at the bit for, is what are some books that you recommend for people? You are an author yourself. What are some other books besides your own that you recommend for people?
Yeah, Simon Sinek, I like his stuff. He wrote a book called Why, right? I think that's solid. Of course, there's the classic Jim Collins and Good to Great kind of books and um, Seven Habits of Successful Leaders, those kinds of books. One I just grabbed recently is Saul Khan, the founder of Khan Academy. I wrote a book on the power of AI and the transformative power of AI for education. I think that's a worthy read for everybody because it's very consistent with my book, Education is Freedom, because mine's a call to action to say technology is literally the future of learning. So it's time for us to step up and embrace it and use it to transform the schools, just as we've transformed space or retail, Blockbuster.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, like, because I've interviewed people from all walks of life, and I've always gotten different recommendations from people. It's funny to think that I've interviewed and asked this question to maybe 20 or 30 people so far out of the maybe 100 or so I've interviewed, and I've never gotten the same recommendation each time. It's always been something different, which is wild, but it still kind of shows that there's still many different aspects of ways to look at things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I want to end this kind of with two questions since we got a few minutes left here. Number one being, um, what's something about you that we probably don't know since we already covered a lot? I know a lot of people are probably going like, "Oh, is this guy like the most interesting man in the world from the Dos Equis commercials or something like that?" And then the other one being, I usually like to end with this one, is we've covered a lot. but I'm sure there's probably something that's sitting in the back of your head or on your chest that you really want to say, but you haven't gotten a chance to say in either this interview or any other ones that you've done. And if so, now is your time.
Sure. Okay. Well, the first one's easy. I'll tell you something that very few people know, and most people wouldn't even believe, but I did run with the Bulls in Pamplona. And I actually did it when I was CEO of 7-Eleven. I could not tell a soul I was going to do it because the board would have had a heart attack. And then it didn't dawn on me until I was actually on the road, Bulls en route, right behind me, and I'm running and I'm thinking, if I end up being the guy that gets gored, do you realize what worldwide headline that's going to be? Idiot CEO gets gored by bull. That would have been really embarrassing. So I
Yeah.
anonymously, but it was the coolest thing. I was in the all whites, with the red bandana and the red sash around my waist. I looked like a local. It was a blast.
And then if you have anything you want to get off your chest.
Yeah, one thing. I have been really lucky. When I launched this book, I didn't know what the reception was going to be. But one of the best things that happened to me was an opportunity to partner with Jimmy Donaldson and Mr. Beast. Beast Philanthropy was doing a deal with Ron Clark Academy in Atlanta, and they said, "How'd you like to collaborate with us? You want to give some scholarships with us?" And so Jimmy held up my book at the end of this video and he said, "Read this book, post a video telling us why education is freedom, post it up, copy Jim at JKeys author, and you too can win one of 10 $10,000 scholarships." And I mean, to me, it couldn't have been a cooler thing to happen because now I've got young people from all over the world, literally from every country you can imagine, and they're putting out videos in hopes of winning a $10,000 scholarship. Instead of writing an essay or something like that, all they got to do is just post up a video that says, "Here's why education is really important to me."
Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah. And that's a really good note to kind of end this on. It's very uplifting. Kind
Yeah.
of think about how a lot
Well,
of people like to.
help me
Oh, go
spread the
ahead.
word. Help me spread the word because the more people post up these videos, the more viral it becomes. I think the more exciting it will be. I can't wait to actually get a chance to step back and view all these videos and pick the winners.
And that'll be a great day for everybody. But with that, we're out of time. So I just want to say thank you. It's been a great time with you. And this has been Justin Kenny with WBCR 88.3 The Saints with Jim Keys. So, Jim, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. And for everybody out there in Radio Land, have a good one.